Hey everyone! So it's me, Ben, or GNC Centric. I did a video a few days ago about my top or chest dysphoria, and today I want to do a video about my internal bottom dysphoria. So, quickly before I start the video, I just want to put a warning. This video will talk about menstruation, ripped hymens, masturbation, self-harm, and it's the most TMI video I've made so far, definitely, for sure. Probably the most TMI video I'll make on my entire channel ever. So, there you go. Yeah, I have two pieces on Medium right now that are relevant to this, and I'm going to put links to them in my description. This video and my last video are kind of expansions on those pieces. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. This kind of dysphoria mainly revolves around my periods and cramps. So I'm going to start with the first time I got my first period. So it was the week before I turned 12. At this point in my life, I wasn't allowed to go to health class, so I didn't know what menstruation was. So I remember the morning I woke up, even in retrospect, it was a lot of blood. I woke up, I felt like there was something wet in my bed, and I took off my blanket and there was like dark blood in the whole bed. I must have started bleeding like as soon as I went to sleep. It was a lot of blood, and I didn't know what it was. I thought I was bleeding from like my urethra or anus or something. Like something was very wrong and I needed to go to the hospital. And I felt like I had to pee and something hurt, and I remember running to the washroom and like there was blood coming out of my underwear and my pants, and it was on the floor and it was on the toilet seat, and I was crying and trying to go to the washroom, and the cramps were hurting. If you're male, you probably don't know, but when you have to pee and you have your period, it can hurt really bad, especially if you have cramps and you're not used to it. The first time is a really strange feeling. But so I thought I was dying. I was on the toilet crying. I was calling for my mom, screaming for my mom, and she came running in, and as soon as she realized what was happening, she just like told me to be quiet, and she cleaned all the blood off the floor, and she told me to like go to my room and stay there and be quiet. And oh look, Momo has joined us. Hi Momo. And yeah, so she left for school with my sister, and my dad was already gone, and she left me home alone, and she just told me to clean my sheets, and she said I could stay home from school for the day. And when I went to my bedroom, there was a book on my bed called The Care and Keeping of You. It's an American Girl book, basically about puberty and your first time getting your period, what are pads and tampons, that kind of thing. And a half-used box of a half-used box of tampons and a half-used box of panty liners. And I never had a real discussion about menstruation or like the sex talk, nothing with my parents. This book was the only information I was ever given by them. And it's a good book, but I think I definitely could have handled a way more in-depth, complex explanation of everything at that point in my life. I was old enough to have had a more medically based book or something. Yeah. So I had this book that explained to me what a period was, why I was having it. I remember being like deeply shocked and confused. I was like, how can this huge secret exist that every single female experiences and nobody talks about? It was like, kind of fucking conspiracy theory is this? And that was the first time I tried using tampons. I followed the instructions in the book, and then I followed the instructions in like the tampon box, and I couldn't get it. And I just felt like everything was wrong with my body, everything was disgusting. I didn't know I thought there was just like 2 holes down there, pee and poo. I didn't know there was a vagina. Everything was shocking to me. I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I couldn't talk to anybody about it. Like, even when I would put my pads in the garbage, my mom gave me like specific instructions. I had to wrap them in the wrapping of the new pad and then in toilet paper so it didn't look like it was a pad because my dad and sister couldn't know I was on my period for some reason. And when I asked her for pads, I would just ask her for special things because if I said pads, she would get mad at me. I don't know how she knew like what size to buy or even that it was not tampons. I don't know, but she bought me the stuff. So yeah, that was. So she never explained to me like, oh, if you have cramps, you can take Midol or this kind of tea helps. Like nothing. I was just by myself. So, when I was like 14, 15, 16, I started getting really bad cramps and having really long periods, like more than 7 days, and heavy bleeding the whole time. And it got to the point where my cramps were so bad that I would try and skip school, but my parents wouldn't let me. Like, they would literally drag me out of bed or, like, drag me towards the shower in the morning, like, get up before school, let's go. So then I would go to school, and the nurse, oh, not the nurse, the secretary at the school, she knew me, and I would be like, I'm not feeling well today, but my parents brought me to school. Can I, like, have a nap in the nurse's office? And they knew my parents wouldn't sign me out of school, but they also knew I was in too much pain to be in class. So I would just, like, sleep in the nurse's office for a few hours and then take the subway home in the afternoon, early, and go to sleep. Yeah, so this is when my dysphoria really started. I'm gonna explain my dysphoria to you before I get on with my timeline of stuff. So, I had two types of internal dysphoria. The first one was, like, intrusive, repetitive fantasies of carving out my uterus and ovaries and everything else. In my mind, it's like when you clean out a pumpkin before you carve it with those scrapey tools. It was like I was doing that inside my body, like cleaning out my body, taking all the disgusting stuff out. And these would be intrusive thoughts that would be stuck in my head, in the back of my mind, like while I was having a conversation with someone, something like that. And the other way I experienced it was I would have like this black, empty, dark, cold hole in between my legs, and it felt like it was gonna suck my whole body in, and it was just emptiness and deadness and just coldness, like it shouldn't be there. Yeah, these usually accompanied one another and could feed off one another and had a lot to do with my period and my cramps. Just a few of the symptoms of these things. I would dissociate and lose time. I would be frozen, unable to move. I'd have intrusive thoughts. I'd have panic attacks. I'd have periods of depression for like 2-3 days where it was like I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't make myself eat. Like, it got to the point where I would be lying in my bed like, okay, you either get out of bed in the next 2 minutes or you're gonna pee the bed. Because I don't have like the energy. When I spoke out loud, it was only because somebody spoke to me. It was like really long, slow, quiet speech. I felt so tired, like moving my tongue took so much energy. I would just be lying in my bed in the fetal position, unable to move, feeling like if I moved, the black hole inside me would like shift and swallow me up or something. It was horrifying. Also, I would have these anxiety naps where I would be so freaked out and having so much anxiety, like my heart was pounding and my chest was tight and cold, and I could just lie down on my bed in the dark and like cover my head and just sleep. I don't know, I guess I was so freaked out that my body just wanted to turn off. Some kind of self-preservation, I don't know. So, that was how I experienced dysphoria quite often. So, yeah, my periods, they were getting really heavy and really painful, so finally, when I was 16, I went to the OBGYN for the first time. Or no, pediatric gynecologist for the first time. And she didn't look at me or anything, but she sent me to get an ultrasound and found I had ovarian cysts. They were too small to operate, but so her only advice to me was to take ibuprofen every 4 to 6 hours, starting 2 days before my period and ending a day after my period, to keep my hormone levels lower to prevent cramping. I had leaky gut at that point in my life. I've had digestive issues my whole life. I still have IBS, so I really can't use that advice. Because if I would have a 7-day period, that would mean I was taking ibuprofen like 6 times a day for like 9 days in a row. I can't do that. I would be vomiting up blood. So it was useless advice. So I left there, and that was it. When I was 17, I think I mentioned this in another video of mine, I was trying to masturbate once, and I ripped my hymen. I didn't really know what was happening. I was trying to masturbate, and suddenly something was cold and wet, but also my skin, like a little bit of a burn. And I was like, and I looked down and there was blood on my blanket. It was actually that blanket. So I was like freaking out, because obviously my mom would notice if there was blood on that. So I immediately like jumped onto the floor. It started bleeding on the hardwood. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? So I cleaned everything up and put on a pad. And I was bleeding so much so quickly. Like, it was much faster than a period. And I was freaking out. And I remember texting I had my dom at the time. I texted him because he was the only person I knew who would have any idea about female anatomy, which is really, really sad. I didn't have any female friends who knew more about it. I didn't have like an aunt or something that I talked to. I had my dom, who was married, so I assumed that he knew about female anatomy. And I was like, I think I ripped my hymen, what do I do? He said, don't freak out, just keep it clean and it'll heal. But I was freaking out, and it was bleeding so much, and I thought maybe I need to go to the hospital tonight. This happened in the evening. And so I ended up not going to the hospital. And the next morning at like 9 a.m. or whatever, I called my OBGYN and I told them I need to see my doctor right away. So I saw her the next day. So this has been 2 days since I ripped it. When I first came in, I didn't actually see my OBGYN. I saw a resident, someone who's doing the residency, a doctor. And so she asked me the normal questions, like, oh, how are your periods, that kind of thing. And I said, like, okay, this is why I came here. You need to look down there. Somebody needs to look down there. Something is not right. Something is wrong. And she kind of dismissed me a bit, but she was like, oh yeah, I'll go get the doctor. So she got the actual OBGYN, and I told her, like, something is wrong, you need to look. So the resident left, and the OBGYN, like, looked between my legs. And, like, as soon as she, like, looked between there, she was like, oh, can I bring the resident back in? And I thought, like, okay, whatever. So the resident came back in, and as soon as she came back in, the doctor was, like, pointing in between my legs. She was like, you see here, this is very unusual. This is very abnormal. You probably won't see this again in your career. She was like, blah, blah, blah. And I was, like, lying on the table for the first time in my life anybody was looking between my legs, and it was, like, these two doctors looking at me like a lab rat. It was really fucking weird. Then she was like, can I put a Q-tip inside you? And I was like, okay. And I remember her putting it in, and it like stretched something a bit, and then there was like something dry and scratchy against inside of my skin. So turns out I have a microperforate hymen. Yeah. So there's basically one really tiny hole down there. And she said to me, like, oh, you can have surgery if you want to have penetrative sex, or if you want to be able to use tampons or menstrual cups. And I was like, yeah. After that happened to me, I was, like, not even listening to what she was saying to me. I couldn't feel my feet when I walked from her office to the elevator of the hospital. I got on the subway home that was right next to the hospital, and I went home, and when I got home, I curled up in my bed in the dark, and I didn't leave my bed for like 2 days. We never really had like family meals or anything like that, so this happened on a Friday afternoon, and I went straight home, and my sister got home. She tried to talk to me, and I just was speaking quietly and slowly with very few words in my bed, like unable to move. And so she's the one who noticed something was really wrong with me. and she brought me, like, food and stuff like that, and she asked me what was wrong, and I was just like, dysphoria, and she was like, okay, and she left me alone, and I think I just watched TV on my iPad and didn't move very much that weekend, and then I was forced to because I had piano lessons, which I never liked piano. It seemed like, out of all the instruments I played, it seemed like the most pointless instrument. No offense to pianists. But yeah, that was the worst dysphoria I ever felt in my life. That was like the black hole of like emptiness, the carving out my organs. Like, it was, that whole weekend, it was in my head. Yeah. So just a few things that I found that help me with cramps or just handling my period. I take magnesium glycinate for an unrelated issue, but it helps a lot with muscle cramps. I drink black cherry juice because it helps with free radicals or something. I don't know what it technically does, but it's great for periods. Cinnamon tea helps with bloating and cramping. Definitely I would drink a lot of cinnamon tea during my periods, just for the bloating. And then there's these TENS units you can get on Amazon. And then these hot beanbag things you can put in the microwave. I love those things. There's one thing that I can identify that really helped me with like tackling this type of dysphoria was when I started using cloth pads. I started using cloth pads when I was 20, and I became friends with this feminist who made cloth pads. They're super great for a few reasons. Like, for one, if you have really heavy periods like I do, you can get like the same designs in different thicknesses. They come in cool shapes, so if you're bigger like I am and you want different shapes that don't come in the standard reusable pads, that's nice. And they're so soft. Well, it depends on the material, but they're so soft compared to plastic pads, like the plastic papery ones. But the thing with with the reusable pads is when you take them off, you put them in a plastic bag, like a Ziploc bag, and then when you get home, you throw them in like a bin to soak, and then you have to rinse them out in the shower, like get the blood out of them, and then put them in the wash. So you have to do all of this interacting with your blood. Before that, my period was like something that happened in my underwear, and then I would throw out the pad or throw my underwear in the wash and not think about it. With the cloth pads, you can't think of it like that. You have to continuously interact with your pads, continuously like touching and interacting with the blood. I think for me that made it less of I was less able to dissociate from it. I had more of like a physical understanding that this was a part of me. Kind of like exposure therapy or something. It just became less disgusting, more like a normal part of me. Yeah, I definitely recommend cloth pads. I love cloth pads. Also better for the environment. Yeah, so that was my internal bottom dysphoria video. I'm going to make another video about my external bottom dysphoria. I'm not sure when. Yeah, so feel free to ask specific questions or comment or ask for a video on a specific topic in the comments. And hit me up on my social media. I'm always on Twitter. So thanks for watching. Bye.